Hello, welcome to the training webinar. I'm Dale Franks. As always, it's a pleasure to be with you again today. Next week is our last training webinar of the year. We will be taking a hiatus until after a new year. The hiatus is a little longer this year. Normally, we take the last 2 weeks off in December. We're going to do it a little differently this year, primarily because at the end of next week, I start a week of potential jury duty for the state of California and the county of San Diego. And the way that we do jury duty here, a lot of places you get your summons and you show up on the day and you hang around. And that's the way we used to do it here in California. You hang around, you might get called for a jury, you might not. If you do get called, you'll be impaneled or released, and then you're done. And if you don't get called for a jury, you just hang out all day, and then they let you go in the afternoon. And then you're done. That's not how we do it here anymore. It's a week long, and you're on call. And you have to call in at after 5 p.m. the night, on every night, the day before you're scheduled for jury duty. For a week, you call in and they will tell you whether or not they want you to show up the next day. So you literally don't know for a week whether you're going to show up for jury duty or not. And so it's not predictable. So that means that on the 19th, I'm still on jury duty, and I don't know if I'm going to be here. I could technically get called in on the 19th. So we're canceling the 19th. Then we're canceling the next week, which is during the holiday week. And then the next Thursday is January the 2nd, which is the day after New Year's. So I'm going to go ahead and cancel that one as well. So we're going to have one next week. There is something on the schedule for next week, and I do want to cover that, by the way, which we'll take a look at it in a minute. We may or may not do the scheduled topic for next week. I think I may have to change that to be announced on the schedule, but next week will be our last training webinar of the year, and then we'll come back on the 9th of January and we'll kick her back off once again. So let's talk about the schedule, by the way, since I'm thinking about it. Let me share my screen. And, well, let me actually look at the schedule. So let me go to guide. So on the BP Logix support site, which is bplogix.zendesk.com, the webinars section has the schedule of webinars. Now, I've got Responsive Forms Bootstrap scheduled for the 12th of December. That may not be the topic that we cover. We may have to do something a little different next week for a couple of reasons, which I don't feel like explaining, but what's on the schedule may not be what we have. I may have to change this to TBA, but I always keep up with the schedule. I'm not sure how many of you even know that this schedule exists or that it's there. And one of the things that I've started to do on the schedule, if we're going to be talking about a more advanced topic, is just to note it on the schedule that it is an advanced topic. So we're not going to be covering basic stuff, or actually in these two cases, for example, we are covering some very special and somewhat complex applications and how to get them set up. So I'll be putting down on the schedule whether things are more advanced topics or whether they're the more basic topics, just sort of general use topics of the product. For example, on 30 January, we'll be covering the advanced reporting component. We'll be taking a deep dive in that. But just so that you know, I kind of thought everybody knew about this, and I've learned recently that that may not be true. Our webinars are all scheduled here, and of course you can register for both the training webinar and the feature spotlight webinar by clicking the appropriate registration links so that you can attend those webinars whenever you're ready to attend them. So that covers the administrative stuff. Let's talk about our subject for today, which is the template library. We're going to be doing something a little bit different today because I'm actually going to be taking a much more detailed, I think, look at the template library. I have no idea, by the way, how long this is going to take. This may end up being a fairly short webinar, and we'll all go home at 11, or it may take 2 hours. It just depends on whether I can force myself to stop talking about stuff. But there are a couple of things that I want to cover that I've never covered before, which is another thing that I'm trying to do on these training webinars, because I do have, I think at this point, 56 or 58 different topics, which means that over the course of about, 13 months or so, we kind of cover everything and start back from scratch. I've even had to build like a calendar schedule so that I can see when the last time it was I talked about something, so that I know I don't cover it like every 4 months and bore you with it. And every time we cover some of these repeated topics, and we've talked about the template library a couple of times before, what I'm trying to do is look at some different or unique aspect of that topic. And that is something we're going to do today with the template library. The point of the template library is to give you some pre-configured, mainly pre-built, although not completely, but mainly pre-built applications that you can use as a basis for your own custom applications. And so each application is encapsulated in its own folder inside a folder called Template Library with square brackets that exists at the root of your Process Director installation. Now, it only exists at the root of your Process Director installation if you download it. And you download it from, again, the support site. Just go to the downloads area. You have to be logged in to download this stuff, or you will not be able to see the Process Director downloads page. But you can log in, go to the Process Director downloads page, and you can download all of the product related items. So as you can see, you can download Process Director, though most of you are cloud customers, so you never will. The custom tasks. Now, this is something that you should be looking at on a fairly routine basis, because custom tasks are not directly related, or are usually not directly related to the product itself. They kind of have their own free and independent lives, and we update them on a separate schedule than the product itself. This is not universally true. Occasionally, there are some changes we make to the product that are so fundamental that we also have to ensure that all of the custom tasks work with that product version. For example, as you can see here, we have a set of custom tasks that are only for Process Director version 4.41 and below, because at 4.5, we made a fundamental change to the product that required new custom tasks. Sometimes we make a change that requires 1 or 2 custom tasks be updated. And so while it may very well be possible that a change to the product also creates a change to the custom tasks that you might want to look out for, the custom tasks themselves are often updated completely separately from the product. And so they have their own release dates. As you can see here, we've last released the custom tasks on 5 September, although there was the Process Director version 6.1.205 patch that we released on 6 November. So these are not directly related to the product, but you need the custom tasks, so you should be downloading them regularly. And finally, that brings us down here to the BP Logix template library, which we last updated on 12 October, and you can download that template library. When you download it, it will actually install 2 folders. It will install the template library folder, and it will also install another folder called template data. You have to have both folders for the template library applications to work correctly. So let's talk, and all the template data is it's a couple of business values, and it connects to an internal database, and there are also some template library groups that exist in an Excel spreadsheet. For these groups to work And for the template library to work properly the way it's configured, you'll need to go into this template data folder, download the template library groups Excel file, and then you'll need to import that Excel file into your Process Director installation, into the groups installation. So you'll need to go into IT Admin, User Installation, and import this file. In fact, let's look at the file. I downloaded the other file, but I didn't download this file. So let's open her up and take a look at what is in this file. And we have these groups that we have added to the file. Let me first say something about the applications that we've put in. When we created the applications, we were getting a lot of requests from higher educational institutions for some of these starter applications that they could use. So the applications are named, and as you can see here from the group names, they're kind of higher education centric. That doesn't mean they won't work for you. It just means that there is some higher ed enabled language in each of these. For example, the groups here, there is financial aid, and there is deans, and there is admissions. If you're not a higher education institution, those groups probably don't mean much to you, but that's okay, because you can rename these groups after you install them, and things will work fine. We'll talk about customization here in a few minutes. But for some of these to work, you do need to grab this Excel file and you need to import it. Now, obviously, if you are a higher education institution, this will all be great for you. I know that several of you are here from the UW system and Metro State, a couple and other schools. So this stuff all seems real familiar to you, and you're just going to be off to the races on this stuff because it's already kind of set up for you. If you're not, there are some things that you might want to change. For example, there's campus locations here. Well, maybe you don't have campuses, but maybe you have office locations. And so you might want to customize this by changing the campus locations to office locations. The nice thing about Process Director is, and there's another one down here, it's a drop-down content list object. And in this particular case, it lists, schools and universities. You might want to reconfigure this to, functional areas of your business if you're not a higher education institution. That's fine. All of these things can be customized. You can change the names. Now, that is one of the nice things about Process Director. We don't have to call this schools and colleges. We can call it something else because the linkages have already been done. Now, the way linkages work in Process Director is that items are linked via the GUID that uniquely identifies each object. Process Director doesn't really care what we call stuff in terms of the name. We do because we're people and we don't talk in GUIDs, but Process Director doesn't talk in text. It talks, between objects in GUIDs, and that's how it identifies them. So you can actually customize these and change the names pretty safely because to the extent that they are linked to other objects, updating the name will just automatically update it everywhere because the name, while we think it's important and we use it and we see it in the content list and what have you, Process Director doesn't care about the names. Process Director cares about the linkages via the GUIDs. So it's pretty safe to change these items. So this template data folder is important. However, once it's installed and everything works, there may be a little bit of confusion on your system about what objects are linked to what. And so you have to make some decisions about how you want to organize these items in your system after you have installed them. Once you install them, Process Director imports them. It assigns GUIDs to all of them. It creates linkages through the GUIDs. And this folder structure that we see here is again, largely for human use, because we need to have some way of organizing items in a way that's understandable to us. Computers don't need to do that. Again, everything is linked via the GUID. So this entire folder structure that you have here, it's for your benefit. It's not for the computer's benefit. Process Director, in most cases, doesn't much care about where objects exist in the system as long as it can touch them via the GUID. Now, there is one big exception to that, and that is during the import. Because during an import, GUIDs don't get imported between systems. So whenever you go to the downloads page and you pull the PDZ file that contains the template library, Process Director does care about relative folder locations in that case, because every object that exists not only has its own GUID that uniquely identifies it, but it is also linked to the GUID of a parent object. And that parent object is often a folder. And Process Director has to sort of trace back through those folders and those folder names. What we have to do is we have to export the folder names. So I should probably back up. Here's how the export process works. When you export items, like we've done with the BP-Logix template library, GUIDs aren't exportable. So here's what we have to do. What we have to do is, during the export process, we have to go and find all of these items by their GUIDs, and then we have to trace out the folder path in the content list where they exist on the source system. So on our source system, we actually have them in the root level of a partition. And this folder is called template data in square brackets, and this folder is called template library in square brackets. And whenever we're exporting anything that's in the template library that uses the template data stuff, we have to save that folder path structure, which in this case is just slash for the default partition, square bracket, template data, end bracket. And it knows that that's the folder location. And we've got to save that as part of the export so that whenever we import the objects into another system, because we can't export GUIDs between systems, we have to look up these names and these folder names and these folder paths that we saved in the export to be able to find out, okay, campus locations. In fact, let me see if I can do this here. Okay, so on this system, right, this is the GUID for template library internal database. And so there are applications here that are associated with that particular data source. And the links to that data source always point to this object. Obviously, whenever we import, this GUID doesn't exist. And so on your system, the name exists. We know it's the template library internal database. And we know that the template data folder exists. Oh boy, I highlighted way too much there. So we're going to look in the template data folder. We're going to find our template library internal database. And then we're going to assign a GUID to it, a brand new GUID that's unique on your system and pretty much in the world. And that we'll assign that GUID to it. And then from that point on, as we import all of these objects here that are in the template library folder, now we know what the new GUID is for this object. So we'll find it via its file location and file path that was exported. But now we see this object has a GUID and we can assign it via GUID. So once everything gets imported, as each object gets imported, it gets assigned a new GUID. Then we go through and try to link up all of the objects that are in various folders. And we trace those links through the folder name and the object name. And then we find their new GUIDs and that we assign them. And at that point, everything is hunky-dunky. We're all fine. Everything is connected via GUID. One of the drawbacks with having the template data folder, and actually kind of one of the drawbacks with the applications itself, is that to make templates, they actually have to be in the template data folder and the template library folder, and they have to talk to each other. The problem is that elsewhere on my system, I have my other global objects. Like here's my data sources. That's in its own folder called data sources. Here are my drop-down objects that have all of my drop-down objects. I've even got some global knowledge views in the system. I've got some, I've got obviously the custom tasks. I've got my business values that are all in their own folder, which has its own square brackets, because these are, in our terminology at BP Logix, these are system folders. And when I import this template data, these global objects now exist in the template data folder. So you got to think about what you want to do with those. You want to keep those in there with the understanding that you are going to have some global objects that don't exist in the proper folders, or do you want to move these objects from these global folders or from the template data folder into your global folders? Now you can move the objects without any problem. So if I go in here and I say, okay, well, I want to take the stuff that's in my template data, I want to take these two business values and I just want to move them over to my business values folder. You can do that after you've imported them. Because again, they now have their GUIDs. The links to those objects are already linked, and those links will get updated. The problem is going to arise anytime you want to re-import the template library, because it's going to write all of these things again, and now you're going to have two copies of these. So keep in mind that the best practice is probably just to realize that inside the template data folder, there are some global objects that you would normally store elsewhere, but that you probably don't want to do that, even though you could after you've imported them, because everything expects them to be here. And anytime you do, if there's an update to the template library, which we have released a couple, then when you re-import that update, it's just going to create these objects all over again in the template data folder. And everything is going to be all higgledy-piggledy. You're going to lose all of your links in the imported applications that are pointing to these objects that you have moved up to these folders, so they no longer exist here on your system. But when you do a re-import, it's just going to write all of this stuff over again. And whenever it overwrites all of these individual applications, then it's just going to point everything right back to the objects that exist here. Also, keep in mind that if you go in and you change these campus locations to, office locations or whatever whatever you want to do in terms of that, fine. Just remember, when you re-import, that's all going to get overwritten. So when you download the template data folder, it's going to overwrite everything. That's one of the drawbacks of the template data system, is that it's the only way that we can make it work so that we can provide you with a download that has this customized information. And yet there are some serious drawbacks in terms of what happens if I need to re-import it, because any customization that I do to any of the items in template data are just going to get overwritten when you do a re-import. That's something to keep in mind, which means that you probably, before you do an import, you probably are going to want to export these items individually. And then after you do the template library import, you're going to have to re-import all of these specific items again to overwrite what was overwritten when you updated the template library with any of the customizations you make. So I'm not super happy with how that works. And if I was you, I probably wouldn't be super happy with how it works. Tempering that disappointment is the realization that I have no earthly idea how we would make it, how we could make it work any differently. So just remember, if you're going to re-import the template library, any changes you make are going to get overwritten. One of the nice things about moving these objects to their correct folders on your system, like business values and drop-down objects and data sources. One of the nice things about doing that is that they are now permanent, right? If I re-import the template data, it doesn't overwrite those objects. They still exist. However, what it does mean, if you want to keep these objects and use them, you're going to have to go into each one of these applications, and you're going to have to find all of those links to either those business values, and I don't think this actually has any links to any of those business values. Let me, in fact, look at one that I think does, which is probably the student change request. I would need to go into the student change request form, and I would need to look very carefully at my custom task event mapping, my set form data, and see if we've got that get student information. Okay, that's pointing to this business value here. If I have taken this business value and moved it, and I probably should, it would probably be even better to look at a drop down, but it doesn't matter. Same old, same old. If I have changed and customized this and moved it out of here, then I have to go to each one of these forms and I have to delete this set form data action, and I have to recreate it with the get student information business value that I've moved up here, presumably into my business values folder, which means that even if I get all of this information, move it to the appropriate system folder on my system, and I don't need any of these objects anymore, when I do a re-import, I'm still going to have to go into all of these applications, and I'm going to have to delete the existing connections to these objects, and I'm going to have to recreate those connections to the customized objects that I've placed up here in my system folders. So re-importing the template library, if you do any customization at all, is going to be an unavoidably huge pain, and I don't really know how to escape that unavoidable pain. I think for a lot of you, there might be an open question as to how useful any of these pre-made objects are, especially if you're not a higher education institution, because once we start looking at the template library, there's some things that are sort of universal that are great. We're going to look at a couple of these. There are some things that really are specific, like the student change request. This is for things like changing a student major. You may just not need this at all. Student feedback, kind of the same thing. The letter generation, now it says student letter generation, but this could be customized to just being a general letter generation application. Registration request, again, that is very student-centric or very higher ed-centric. However, the IT request, financial approval, equipment, cab, room reservation, employee change requests, contact us, checklist requests. These things are all very generic and very universal. And so those would be items that you might want to keep. In fact, what you might want to do is just import the template data once, get rid of stuff that you don't think that you're going to use, and then build your own templates, which we'll talk about in a little bit. So with all that in mind and the complications of how imports and exports work and how customization might be in danger if you re-import, the fact is you don't have to import the template library at all. You can, if you don't have the template library or the template, if you don't have the template library on your system, you can just create it. You can literally go into your content list, go to the root of the default partition, and just create two blank folders, one named template data and one named template library. Ta-da! You have the template library. There's nothing in it, so you can't do much with it, but you have the template library. It exists. In fact, in more recent versions of the product, I think in any 6.1 version product, and we might have done this on 6.0 too. I just don't remember that far back into the past, last year. An error may crop up if you don't have the template library and template data systems. I think there's an error message that appears at the top. And I don't remember exactly when it shows up. It doesn't show up when you just pop open, but I think if you go right here to the Create New menu, trying to hit Start from Template is going to cause all sorts of nastiness to happen because you got no templates, because you got no template library folder. You do need both of the folders. But you definitely need template library as a minimum for the template system to work. I think we've got it set that we're looking for a template data library folder as well, simply because the applications that we have in there reference a bunch of things in that folder. So just create both of those folders. They could both be empty, but you would then have the template data and the template library. And then you can create your own application, which we'll run over briefly a little bit later. In point of fact, some of these applications are pretty cool and they do work well. And there are applications that you might want to use for a lot of stuff. Some of these template applications are actually pretty good and they're fairly complex. For example, there is the checklist request application. Now, a lot of these applications have their own configuration data folders, and the checklist request is no exception. Let's actually run the form real quick so we can see what it shows us. Now, this is a checklist request. I'm not super happy with the format of this form. I would make it a lot prettier if I was in charge of redesigning it. However, down here in this array, I've got these items that have already been pre-populated in here. Request transcripts, attach reference letters, check on student aid, etc. This is actually coming from an Excel file which is just attached to the process when you create it. And that Excel file exists here in the configuration data folder. Now, there's a reason that it's here rather than in template data. The stuff that's in template data might be used by any application. Stuff in the configuration folder is only used by this application. And the reason why it has its own configuration folder is that obviously every time I create a new copy of this application, I'm gonna probably want a different checklist. And that's fine, that's cool, because the way this application works is that it just takes the items that are in this checklist, and I suppose we should look at them. So where's downloads? Right there. I hate that you can't just pin the downloads button in Edge. Well, we can take a look at the checklist, and this is it. Get application request transcripts, yada, yada. It has all the stuff in order. And this gets attached to the process whenever you create a new instance of the application. And so inside the form itself, so we'll go to our checklist request form, and let's go to the custom task event mapping. We're actually running the fill fields from Excel custom task. Now, we are attaching that Excel spreadsheet to the form, or basically a copy of that Excel spreadsheet, to the process every time actually we're attaching it to the form, every time we open up a new instance of that form. And what we're doing is we're looking at that item to complete field, which is an array field on the form, and we are binding it to column A in the Excel spreadsheet. So that means that every time I make a new copy of this application, and we'll talk about that in a minute, what I will need to do for that new application is I'll need to go into the configuration data folder. I'll need to pop open this Excel spreadsheet, and I'll just need to put in order the items that need to be completed on that checklist. When the form loads up, it will bind the items that you have now placed for that application. It will just bind them to that form array, and it will show all the items in order that come out of that checklist. So it's in the configuration data folder because every time I create a copy of the checklist request as a new application, I'm going to need to go into the configuration folder, and I'm going to need to update the checklist so that it shows me the proper checklist items that I need for that specific application. But presumably each individual application will have its own checklist that needs to be run. There's also a similar version of that in the template library. I think it's in the equipment/cab/room reservation. In this case, it's called source data. And there is a shared equipment spreadsheet, which does kind of the same thing. And let's download a copy of that and open it. So we can just see the sort of equipment that's in there. And in this case, it's a whole bunch of science-y stuff. There's a pipetting robot Eppendorf EpMotion 5075 TMX, which sounds like one heck of a complicated piece of equipment. Your equipment may not quite be that complicated, but you do have this equipment list that as part of the scheduling application, you can also schedule not just rooms, but you can schedule the use of various types of equipment. And this does affect how the process works, by the way, because there is there's a couple of rows or columns in this particular spreadsheet that determine how the process is going to work based on whether you need to be trained before you can check it out, whether it requires supervision whenever you're using it, or most importantly, whether you need approval to be able to actually grab that equipment and use it. So you can try to schedule it, but if you need approval, then you've got to go through an additional approval process for that piece of equipment. This is a fairly complex application. It's pretty cool the way it is got set up. Again, we can access both equipment, and also we have a room list that is put in here. And in this case, they're just a bunch of conference rooms so that we can schedule a conference room for a meeting, presumably. And of course, you can customize that. Again, keep in mind, whatever customization you do here, so we're talking about drawbacks again, whatever customization you do here, if you re-import the template library, all your customization gets overwritten. This is also another one of those things that I'm not super happy with, but I don't know how we do it differently, which is that in this source data folder, every time I create a copy of this app, I'm going to create a copy of these 2 business rules, these 4 business values, this shared equipment data source, and these 2 dropdowns, all of which are kind of global information. And every time I make a new copy of this application, it's all going to get recopied over. Now, for the shared equipment, maybe you do want that copied over because maybe for, different reservation applications that you have, different divisions or departments or what have you might need to, schedule different types of shared equipment. So That I'm not going to make too big of a deal about. However, these are supposed to be global objects, and we're having to replicate them every time we make a new application based on this particular template. So while the ones that we provide, there's some pretty useful stuff in here that is sort of generally useful by everybody. Some of it's really simple. Well, I say simple, but it actually gets more complicated whenever you start looking at it. There's a contact us things here with contact us reasons and contact us responses as drop-down objects. And so you have this rather complicated contact us application, but it is useful. So there's some useful stuff here. I'm agnostic about, especially if you're not a higher education institution, about faculty request, registration request, what have you. IT request, probably useful by anybody. Financial approval, probably useful by anybody. Obviously, these change requests, the contact us, checklist requests, these are generic and can be used by everybody. Another thing you have to remember whenever you use anything in the template library is that we don't know who actually works for your organization. So we don't know who to actually assign tasks to. Now, some are pretty simple. It's got to be the timeline initiator who does this task. But for the rest of them, we either have to put in a form field to use a form field, or we have to use group assignment to assign it to a group, which brings me back to that Excel spreadsheet I talked about at the very first with the groups. Those groups have to exist on the system or none of these applications would work. That's why they're part of the import. So for example, the accounting, well, in this particular case, it's not assigned to a group. It just has groups blank, which is, it's fine. I'm not sure why, but it does highlight the issue. We don't know who you have on your system. We don't know what users you have. So some of the forms, you have to just choose who the user is, like who should make the change. Some of these forms have groups assigned. The groups are blank. And we do a lot of group assignments, so that's going to be the most common. I really would like to see if, and I forgot to check on this earlier, I want to see if we have any actual individual group assignments that are not, that's the employee change request. Let's go back to contact us process. Okay, that's a system variable assignment. Again, that's a group assignment. It appears to be blank. Financial approval. That's probably going to have a whole bunch of group requests as well. Well, 2 of them and 1 more, what department has to approve. So that is a drop-down control. Which points out that these are very, very generic apps. And we don't know who's in your system and we don't know who gets assigned stuff. And so we either have to leave a lot of stuff blank, like with our, please stop trying to help me, Edge. We have to have a lot of stuff blank, like we do for the groups, or we have to throw form fields on the form, like the department approval form field, so that the participant for this task is whoever we pull from the department approval user picker. Sometimes it's great to be able to use a user picker to just pick a participant to a process on an ad hoc basis so that the submitter can just pick them on the fly while they're filling out the form. And that sounds good in some cases, but there's a lot of cases where you don't really want the submitter to make the determination of who gets to approve their request. You want that to be sort of baked into the process. So with a lot of these applications, you've got to go through, look at these process timelines, find things like, oh, this is from form field. So that's got to be changed, which means for this activity, I have to do 2 things. Not only do I need to go to, and now we're talking about after I have created an application based on this template. Although you might want to do it in the template itself so that it's, permanently done, assuming we're not going to overwrite the template by re-importing, which I'm not sure I'd ever recommend that you do, even if we came out with a new version of the template. But we'll talk about that a little later. Anyway, like I said, there's two things that you got to do, whether it's in the application that you create from this particular template, or whether you want to make a permanent change to the template so that all new applications reflect the way that you want this type of application to work. First thing I've got to do is I've got to change this to from form field to either groups or business rule or whatever that I need to specify the particular person who I want to perform this department approval. Now, with department approval, it's kind of interesting because if I don't know what department the submitter is in, maybe I do need them to choose their department so that it can get assigned to the right person for their department for department approval. For other things, it might need to go to some specific person, finance, HR, or whatever. Since it's a financial approval process, it may need to go to finance. I may have some different way of doing this. I may need to assign a specific user or a group. I got to make that change here. And if I've got to make that change here, that also implies that I got to open up the financial approval form. And I've got to go into the design view of that form. And I have got to find that department approval user picker, and I've got to remove it from my form. So I've got to do a little bit of form redesign on that form so that I don't have that now useless control because I'm not allowing the user to pick the department approver anymore. I got to get rid of that on the form. So these are very generic applications, and you are going to have to make some changes to them in almost every case, for almost every institution, to make them work the way that you want. You may even get rid of some of these applications simply because they're just not relevant to your organization and how your organization works. The thing is, once you start customizing these things, whether it's getting rid of some of these applications that might not reflect how your business works, or whether you go into these individual items and you start customizing them, which you might want to do, you should perhaps get into the mindset that importing or that re-importing the template library after you've done it once is something that you can never do again. So in that case, let's say I do need to re-import the template library. Let's say that we've come up with some new template application that you like. Then what I would do is I would go somewhere else in my content list, like the training webinar folder, and I would import the template library folders into this folder, somewhere outside of the root of the default partition. Once they're in this folder, if there's a new application that I like, I can just click on that application itself, and I can just export that application. So let's see, I'm still on the downloads page, right? So what I would do in this case is I would just pull the template library. We'll say bptemplates.zip here, save, save, save. I've now saved that file. I'm in the training webinar folder. I can just import objects, and I can import that BP template zip right into here, and it will just make a copy of the template folder. Ensure this is valid XML that was exported from process director. Oh, hey, here's the other thing we need. Here's the other thing we need to do. Once we download our downloads, that's a zip file. And inside that zip file is a PDZ file. We got to unzip this thing first. So let me extract all. Oh, I actually did want it there. Sorry. Extract. There we go. Now I've got templates.pdz. That's the actual file that I want. So let me re-import. And let's import the actual PDZ file. There we go. That should work a lot better. And it'll probably take a couple of minutes, which will give me a chance to have a sip of coffee. And we'll get this import whenever it's done. Which clearly is going to take a few minutes. And what I want to do is once it imports, which is taking a while. I always hate it when these things take a while. Start sweating inside my nice woolly pulley sweater because things are not going fast enough. The idea is that what I want to do is if I have an individual application that I want, I'm going to import it here into some subfolder way down in the nether regions of my content list. Then I can take individual applications that I want. I can export them individually. So like if it's a new application, and then I can go back up to my real template library folder and I can re-import, or I can import that single application into this folder, which presumably would not overwrite anything that I've already created and therefore overwrite all of the customizations that I may have made to any of these applications. So importing the template library once is pretty much the only option that you have. And after you've done that, well, then you're stuck with going into, exporting it to some weird place. And I don't even have an application. Well, let me create an application since every folder in the template library is considered to be an application. So we'll just call this webinar 1. And we'll create the webinar 1 folder. And let me go into its properties and just give it some weird icon here. Let's pick a color that we can see. And I already had one picked out and now it's gone. Fine. Doesn't really matter what icon we pick. So I didn't want to pick that icon though. And why is it that color? What happened there? What did we do? There we go. I'll pick that icon. We'll update it. So now, and I've put it in the template library and equipment. I clearly didn't want it there. Oh, wait, that's an Excel file. Oh. I have done something horribly, horribly wrong somehow. I must have clicked on something. I must have clicked on something bad. Let's try this again. I don't know what I clicked on, but it wasn't great. Oh, and now I'm back up. I don't know what is happening. I am clicking on things that aren't supposed to be happening. So I'm going to properties. Yes. Go to icon. I'll just pick an icon. I hit OK. Okay, that all seemed to work. All right, fine. So now I have an application called Webinar 1. So at this point, what I would do is I would just export this application, which is a pretty empty application at this point. Oh, wait, I want to click export right there. Click OK. Save my Webinar 1 application into my folder here, webinar1.pdz. Great, it has been saved. Now I've exported that application and I can go all the way back up here to my template library. And once I'm inside the template library folder, I can just import objects and I can import. Why does it keep showing me the preview pane, which I do not want to see? We'll import webinar 1.pdz, and it imported, and we hit close. And now I've got webinar 1. Why it doesn't have my icon that I just put on it, I do not know. So I'm not sure what's happening here with that, but I've got my webinar 1 application. And by the way, now that I've imported it into the template library, when I go to create new and start from template, it's going to go through, and each one of these is a folder, which I haven't actually explained yet, but I will here pretty soon. Each one of these is a folder, and each folder contains an entire application. So now I'm not sure what's taking forever to show me this, but this is all of the applications that I have on my system, and I have a new one called Webinar 1. And so I don't want to have created an application where I created it because I was inside the template library. So that is a super bad thing to do. So now that I've got my new application, what I want to do is go back down here to training webinar. I have exported the application that I want out of here. So I don't need these folders anymore. So I really do want to delete them so that they are not on my system, so that I don't have two different copies of the template library residing there. Hopefully it will delete them faster than it took to import them, although it does appear to be taking a while to delete them. Let's go. Let's go, buddy. You can do it. Well, I got rid of the template library folder, or the template data folder. Come on, come on, come on. I shouldn't be prompting it the way that I'm doing. I'm just trying to make things go faster, which I should be more patient, because it's probably going to end up taking more time to do it the way I'm doing it. But I'm just so impatient. Well, it's trying. It's getting rid of stuff. I'll delete that later. The important thing is that now that I'm in this folder, in my training webinar folder, I can go to create new, start from template, and I can just call this ZZZZZ, and I can pick webinar 1 as my application, and it will replicate my application. Now the application didn't have anything in it. It was just an empty folder. So I only get an empty folder here, but now I have my ZZZ application running inside Process Director, and it's perfectly usable. So once you do the initial import and you start customizing things, that's probably the import path you'll have to take to bring in new objects. I'm not sure how often we're ever going to update it, but just keep in mind that once you start customizing the template library, additional imports are going to be problematic because it's going to override everything. Like I said, I wish there was a better solution to making that work. I just can't think of one. So we're still going to go through the process of deleting it. So while we're going through that process of deleting it, I'll tell you what we'll do. I'll just keep that running, and we'll just pop over to the documentation server and go straight into that one, because the content list is pretty much I have two-factor authentication. Of course I do. Why wouldn't I? Why? I keep meaning to turn it off and failing to turn it off. So as you can see, two-factor authentication works. Okay, so as I implied just a few seconds ago, in fact, I did not imply it, I outright said it. Each one of the applications in the template library exist inside a parent folder. So even though these applications, let's go back up to the template library. So even though these folders do not actually have folder icons, they all have their own individual icons, including some old icons that I wish we weren't using. These are folders, even with their weird icons. Now, the reason that we have the weird icons on them, and by the way, not all of these are weird, but like that icon there and that one, these are all old style icons that are bitmap icons that I hate. They're like from the 90s. So we should have more modern icons on these. But that aside, the reason why that these folders all have icons is specifically because whenever I go with the create new start from template, that will be the icon for the application. Normally, we keep folder icons as folders simply because it lets us know that it's a folder. In this case, we have a higher purpose, which is to show you the appropriate icons whenever you're making your faculty request. And by the way, I think you can see what the difference is between these old style bitmap icons that we have used and the nice modern icons that use Font Awesome to create the icon, because we can resize those so that they look good, while these are always 16 by 16. So these icons should all be changed. However, that aside, and this is probably from the initial import of this, by the way, so that's wise to have all the old icons. That aside, that's what those icons are there for, so that I can see what type of application I have. And I've done that myself when I did what you should do whenever you use the template library, whether or not you use any of these applications. And I don't have an investment in any of these applications. Some of them I think are cool and useful, and you could do some neat things with them. But the one thing that you really, really want to do is the one thing that we haven't provided you, and that is a default application stub. And that is important to have. So whether you use anything else in the template library, you should create a folder and create your own application stub. I've done that here, and it's only got 3 objects. It's got a form, it's got a timeline, and it's got an email template. And then it has a couple of subfolders, none of which have anything in them, for business rules, knowledge views, and I've got a managers folder in case I want to make some management knowledge views and I want to play around with the permissions on that folder to only give it permissions to, particular manager groups or whatever. And then I can show knowledge views that might have more sensitive information in them or what have you. Basically, I'm just setting up a kind of an architecture for the application for objects that don't even exist. I'm just creating the folder structure for the most common objects that I'm probably going to need to have. I'm probably going to have a business rule or two, probably going to have some knowledge views. I may or may not have some knowledge views that I only want to show to managers. So, I might or might not use that folder, but I probably am going to use business rules and knowledge views. So I'm just going to create those folders. And then I have my 3 objects here. My form and my timeline and my email template are the most important objects in any application. You always want to have, well, if you don't have a form and a timeline, you don't have an application. And if you do have a form and a timeline, you're probably going to want to send notifications. So you should have your own custom email template rather than using the built-in one that comes in Process Director. What this enables me to do is to ensure that anytime I create a new application, it's going to look the same all the way across all of my forms that end users have access to. It's difficult to stress enough the importance of having a common format for all of your forms, both in design and look and feel, and in the types of fields that are on those forms, like those required forms that we see up here at the very top that we always use at BP Logix, the submitter, the submission date, and the request number. This enables me to not only have a common design motif for all my forms, because every time I create a new application, and this is, by the way, this text field shouldn't even be in here. So it's clearly an artifact of me demonstrating this before. But what this does do And I didn't want to delete that. I wanted to delete that stupid text field. Okay, please delete the text. Well, now it needs a name. Please delete the stupid text field. There we go. Now it's gone. So this is my base form. It has all of the base things that I need. It's got my logo. It's got my colors. It's got my fonts. It has my 3 required controls. It has a couple of blank section controls, one of which is going to store my request information. This is going to be the stuff that the submitter fills out. I've got my button area control, and I've got my routing slip immediately below it. So every form that gets created on my system, every application will have a form that looks kind of like this. So all of my forms have a unified look and feel. Every time I'm going to create a new application, I just create it from the template library. I create it from my application stub. It's going to give me that form. That way, every time a user opens up a form, it will be quite obvious that it's my organization's form because I've imposed our design language on the form, such as it is in this particular case. Equally importantly is I can enforce best practices without having to configure them. So notice I've got form fields are enabled only when new form instance equals yes. Entire form is read only when timeline status equals complete. So the form can only be edited during the initial submission. That enables me to specify particular sections or controls that I want to enable during the approval process. But by default, all the controls are disabled. So the form is not editable outside of its initial submission by the user. That provides me with a little extra security on the form to prevent, if nothing else, people from inadvertently changing form fields. And when the timeline status is complete, I want to set the whole form as read-only so that even if you could go in and make a change to a form field, it wouldn't save the form anyway, so that once the timeline status is complete, the timeline is done, I don't want people to come back in and edit the form. I have a timeline in this folder, and I've already set the start this process after form is submitted and the timelines associated with process. So this form is associated with that timeline. It will start that timeline automatically, this timeline here, automatically when the form is submitted. Similarly, in the timeline itself, I have in the options section made the connection to the form and made the connection to the email template, which we haven't looked at, but we'll take a look at in a second. Then I have a couple of just very simple generic activities associated with. I've got my set request number, which we've talked about many times, so I'm not going to belabor that point. I've got an approval loop, which is a looping activity, contains 2 child activities, approval 1 and approval 2. I'm obviously going to have to rename these. These are both currently set with the default participants and default results. So I haven't configured any of that. So obviously this will be assigned to timeline initiator if I was to run it. And there are no results, so the only result would be complete. Obviously, this stuff is all going to have to be configured. And then I've got a result notification activity. That's it. That's about as basic as I can get. I think most of my applications are going to be some sort of approval activity. I'm going to need to tell the submitter what happened when they submitted their request, whatever it is for approval. And that's it. Nothing else has been configured, but I do have a timeline and a form that are associated with each other, and the timeline is also associated with an email template, which again, I'm going to impose my organization's design language, such as it is, on this form by giving it this blue banner up top. Note there's no logo on this form, because Outlook is just going to strip out the logo anyway, and it's just going to leave a broken image icon where the logo is. So unless you add a user as a trusted user, your logo is never going to show up anyway. So I'm not going to mess around with logos. I just have a text email. And by the way, this is the most fundamental email message I could possibly make. Dear email user, you've been assigned a task. Click here to view it. Oh, here's your email data control. That's it. Super, super simple, super basic, but it's all got the same look and feel. It's all hooked up together. The form incorporates my best practices, including, even though I didn't mention it when we looked at the form and we were looking in the options section, I've got show disabled fields as text checked. I know some of you push back with me on that, but that's just how I like to do it. I'm not your supervisor. I'm not going to make you do it. So you really do need in the template library this application stub. That's going to be super useful. If for no other reason, then it just saves you a ton of time at the beginning of creating an application where you've got to hook everything together and you got to put the same stuff on the form, because most of you have sort of similar requirements in terms of how your applications work and look. This just makes that job a lot easier if you have some sort of application stub. So every time you're going to create a new application, you just go to create new, start from template, and you just give the application a name and you pick the application. Now, I don't know that I pointed this out earlier, but I'll go ahead and do it here. Last thing to remember about these templates whenever you're using them is if I go to start from template, it's really important that I put a new application name here. So again, we'll just call this webinar. So that's going to, I can type. We're just going to call this webinar. That's going to be the name of my application. And then I'm just going to use my application template for this because it'll make it the quickest, because some of these are a little more complex. The important thing is that once I say I'm going to do that, I'm going to create my webinar application. One of the reasons why I have the object called form, timeline, and email template is because whenever I create my application, which remember I've called webinar, it's going to add that to the name of all of the objects. So I have my webinar email template, my webinar form, and my webinar timeline. So by giving them these very simple generic names, when I append the name of the application to them, I still know it's the form and the timeline, but now it has my application name. So as long as I don't have two applications of the same name, I will have unique names for my form and my timeline definition, which does make finding them in the content list a little bit easier, although I think in my case, I have probably used webinar for about 10,000 different things. So webinar is not particularly helpful in helping me find specific items in this particular context. I probably should have given it webinar 2024 12 whatever the date is, 5. Is it 5? Yes, December 5th. Then it would have been unique and I could have found it easily. But in any event, that's probably the most important thing about the template library is just being able to create your own application stub so that all of your forms have a unified look and feel and they work the same way and are all familiar to your users. I really do want to stress that having a consistent UI for your users is enormously important in just the sort of muscle memory and subconscious learning that users do when they see the same UI over and over again. They're familiar with it. They know how it works. And if they see something new that they're not familiar with, because you've used the same design practices over and over and over again, they already have instinctually some instinct about what the proper thing to do would be with the new thing that you've shown them, simply because they know how you generally design forms. It's pretty important to have that design language that you're going to use for your organization figured out so that your end users become familiar with how you build applications. I've stopped sharing because I'm going to stop talking. I hope you have a great week. I'll see you next week for our last training webinar of the year. Until then, so long.